The United Kingdom has one of the most straightforward tax systems in the world, based on their tax residency test, which includes a predetermined set of criteria. You either are a tax resident or you are a non-resident of the United Kingdom, and it's called the Statutory Residence Test. Simply put, this test allows you to work out your residency status in the United Kingdom for each individual tax year. The Statutory Residence Test takes into account two factors. Number one, the amount of time you spend and work in the UK. And number two, the connections you have with the UK. So let's dive deeper into this. If you don't know me already, my name is Cheyenne from GenZone, and we help individuals from all around the world set up their companies here in Dubai, obtain residency, open personal and business bank accounts, to pay less taxes, and fully establish here in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. To begin with, if you've spent 183 days or more in the UK in an individual tax year, there is no need to consider any of these tests. You are automatically a taxable resident of the United Kingdom. And that's often a general rule for most countries. If you spent 183 days or more within a country, you are often a taxable resident. But if you've been in the UK for less than 183 days, you can consider these tests to determine your residency status. The first residency test is the automatic overseas test. And within the automatic overseas test, there are three tests to consider. The first automatic overseas test says that you'll be a non-UK resident for the tax year if you were a resident of the UK for one or more of the 3 tax years before the current tax year, and you spend fewer than 16 days in the UK in the tax year. The second automatic overseas test says that you'll be a non-UK resident in the tax year if you are a resident of the UK for one or more of the 3 tax years before the current tax year, and you spend fewer than 46 days in the UK in the tax year. And the third automatic overseas test states that you'll be a non-UK resident for the tax year if you work full-time overseas over the tax year, and the number of days which you work 3 hours or more in the UK is less than 31 days, and there is no significant break from your overseas work. It's important to note that this test can apply for both employees and self-employed people. Now, if you do not meet any of these automatic overseas tests, you would then go to the automatic UK tests. And again, the automatic UK tests are divided into 3 separate tests. The first automatic UK test says that you will be a resident of the UK if you spend 183 days or more of the tax year in the United Kingdom. The second automatic UK test states that you'll be a resident of the UK if you have or have had a home in the UK for all or a part of the year, and all of the following apply. There is or was at least one period of 91 consecutive days where you had a home in the UK. At least 30 of these 91 days fall in the tax year where you had a home in the UK and you've been present in that home for at least 30 days at any time during the year. And at that time, you had no overseas home, but if you had an overseas home, you were present in it for fewer than 30 days in the tax year. Now, if you have more than one home in the UK, you should consider each home individually to see if you meet any of these tests. But you'll only need to meet this test in relation to one of your homes in the UK. The third automatic UK test states that you'll be a resident of the UK for the tax year if all of the following apply. You work full-time in the UK for any period of 365 days during the tax year. More than 75% of the total number of days in the 365-day period are days where you do more than 3 hours of work in the UK, and at least one day which has to be both in the 365-day period and the tax year is a day which you do more than 3 hours of work in the UK. Now, the final test to consider is the sufficient ties test. If you do not meet the automatic overseas test or the automatic UK test, you can use the sufficient ties test to determine your residency in the United Kingdom. Now, in this case, you'll consider your connections to the UK, known as ties. This essentially works out if your ties, taken together with the amount of time you spend in the UK, will make you a resident of the United Kingdom for a particular tax year. If you were not a resident in the UK for any of the 3 tax years Before the one you are considering, you'll need to check if you have any of the following. Number 1, a family tie, if your spouse or your partner is in the UK. Number 2, an accommodation tie, if you have an accommodation available to you in the UK for at least a period of 91 days. Number 3, a work tie, if there are 40 days or more in the UK in which you did 3 hours or more of work. And number 4, a 90-day tie, if you spent 90 days or more in the UK for at least one of the 2 previous tax years. So with the sufficient ties test, the more ties that you have to the UK, the fewer days you can spend in the UK before becoming a UK tax resident. And the United Kingdom clearly states out the amount of days in which you can spend in the United Kingdom before becoming a tax resident of the UK with the amount of ties that you have. So let's go over them. Table A shows you the UK ties needed if you are a UK resident for 1 or more of the 3 tax years before the tax year under consideration. As you can see in the first row, if you have 4 ties to the UK, you can spend between 16 to 45 days in the United Kingdom. In the second row, if you have 3 ties, you can spend 46 to 90 days in the UK. In the third row, if you have 2 ties, you can spend 91 to 120 days in the United Kingdom. And in the fourth row, if you only have 1 tie, in this situation, you can spend over 120 days in the UK before being considered a tax resident. Now, Table B shows us the UK ties needed if you were a UK resident in none of the 3 tax years before the tax year under consideration. The first row shows us that if you had 4 ties to the UK, you can spend 46 to 90 days in the UK before being considered a tax resident. The second row shows us that if you have at least 3 ties, you can spend 91 to 120 days. And the third row shows us that if you have 2 ties, you can spend over 120 days. So if you meet any of the automatic UK test or the sufficient ties test, then you will be considered a UK resident for the tax year. But if you do not meet any of those 2 tests, then you will not be considered a tax resident of the UK for the tax year. And of course, if you meet any of the automatic overseas tests, then you will not be considered a UK resident for the tax year. If this video was helpful to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you're looking to set up your company and obtain residency here in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, make sure you book a call with the link in our description, and our team at GenZone will be happy to assist you.